Hi, this is Capt Lee Noga from the Florida Shrimping Academy. Today I'm going to teach you the art of light deployments. Now, I'm talking about shrimp as my target, but these theories and proven techniques work on anything that you set out to catch. I started off by showing you the end, meaning success and simplicity. This is what I'm going to teach you. But it all starts at the very beginning of the advantages, and that's the moon phases. In the diagram, let's start at the top, where it says half moon, maximum weakness. What this means is the current, or the tide, is at its absolute weakness. By the way, shrimp do not like to move out on a weak current. They like to be locomoted. They can swim up to 3 to 5 miles a day. So a half moon is not an ideal time to go. If you strategically can pick a night, this would not be that night. So once the half moon passes, which is a single day event, the next 7 days, the tide is building. And that's notated by those plus signs. On that 7th day, we hit the new moon. What that means is the current is at its absolute strongest. And shrimp like strong current. So ideally, you should go 3 days before a moon event and up to, and I'm pushing it, 2 days after. So once the new moon passes, which again, that's a single night event, the next 6 days, the tide is declining. That's notated by the minus signs. On the 7th day, once again, the tide is at its absolute weakest. That is not ideal for shrimp to run. Sit that out. The following 6 days are a building tide. In the diagram, that's notated by plus signs. On the 7th day of that building tide, you're going to hit a full moon. That's when the tide again is at its strongest. There's no difference between the new moon and the full moon as far as tide strength goes. They are both equal moon events. So what I'm saying is twice a month, and sometimes 3 times, you have a moon event, which is the strongest of currents. Following the full moon, notated by the minus signs, we have 7 days of weakening tides. On that 7th day, you once again be at the half moon, which is maximum weakness. So when people ask, when should I go? My response is 3 days before a moon event, up to 2 days afterwards. So if there's 2 moon events a month, and that's a block of 5 days, then that's 10 days of the month that I would consider scheduling a night out. It doesn't have to be difficult, but this is one of the most important advantages that we have in our arsenal. This is a standard shrimping net. It is anywhere between 28 and 30 inches round, and the rim should be solid metal, even though some are sold with hollow rims, and that's not what you want. It's got to be clear monofilament. The size can be either 3/8 inch or 1/2 inch. What's the difference between the two? The 3/8 inch is a smaller mesh, and some people do not want really small shrimp, so they go to the higher 1/2 inch mesh. Pretty much standard in the stores, most all will be 3/8. It's an exception if you find one at 1/2 inch. Handles are 8 foot, lightweight aluminum, and the back sock can be anywhere between 4 and 6 foot long. The mono test is 11 pound, And you don't want to get into these crazy things like dyeing your mono black or gray or blue. Don't do that. Anything dark, the shrimp can see the shadows and they will avoid the netting. This is why it's imperative that you only fish clear mono. Always carry 4-inch cable ties. You never know when something that you caught earlier may have ripped your net. And if there's a small opening anywhere in your mono net, you will hemorrhage shrimp. Out in retail, you're going to see all kinds of crazy things. Just because it's a boating store or bait shop, don't be so trusting. If you see nets like this, run from them. Why? You see, number one, it's a black net. The shrimp can see that. So for that reason, that's not a candidate as a shrimping net. Secondly, look at the long bar. As you push that bar into the water, you displace the water, and that causes a vibration and alerts the shrimp to danger ahead. As I was evolving the generation of shrimp lights, we also had net makers looking to see perhaps there might be a need for a net design change. Maybe the round isn't the gold standard anymore. So I took up the challenge, and this was the net. And with my partner on the boat, she got 3 shrimp for every 0 I got. And that's pretty much what I got, 0. And they were running beautifully. And the reason why is look at that long, elongated front bar. When I broke the water with that, I sent a tsunami to the shrimp, which they would dive right before I almost got them in the net. So this is exactly why these designs fail. The round, when put on its side, oh, wait a minute. Let's just get that picture so you can really appreciate it. Not only is the round net the only acceptable dipping net, the style has to be equally given credit as well. For some reason, people want to scoop shrimp, where they put the net in the water and they pull up towards the sky, and then they shake the shrimp down, and it creates a lot of dribbling. And you know those long antennas on the shrimp? Well, they sense the vibration of those dribbles striking the water, and they dive. So technique is this. Put the hoop on its side, go into the water, and pull to the left 4 or 5 foot, flip the net, and then pull the opposite direction. This is called sweeping. And if you do this, you can get multiples. If you do the dipping where you pull it up towards the sky and you shake, you're only getting 1 at a time, or maybe 2. But if you lay it on its side, you don't displace the water badly, so therefore you don't tip them off. And you can comfortably wait until they bring their friends and sweep a handful at a time. The only way you're going to make a full pull is dipping multiples. Shrimping is one of the more dangerous sports to do at night because you are flirting with the center or thereabouts of the intercoastal. You're dealing with people's headlights and spotlights and whatever, which is blinding. You're dealing with strong currents, wind chop, all kinds of things. So it's really important to go down with strong anchors, and I'm not a fan of the Danforth anchors that are sold in big box retail. I'm a fan of these. One is the 3-claw paddle anchor, which is the least expensive, and of course I was gifted the plow anchor, which is about 3 times more. The point is when you're set up horizontal, the amount of tension on your anchor line is going to be so strong, there's times where you can hear it whistle out there. When we get involved in our hunt, we get so fixated on what we're doing, we feel this form of disorientation, and we don't realize that slowly our boat is drifting. You know it when people start hollering at you, and it takes a while because you're not expecting anybody to be talking to you in the dead of night. You don't want to get caught in a situation where you're sliding, because it instantly leads to a panic where people will automatically reach for their boat key, turn their engine on, and suck in their anchor lines. And now they're prop fouled and they're about to strike a boat with children. That's a real scenario. I have had that diaper change. So my point to you is, go down with anchors you know that can endure. It's well worth the investment, and they do save lives. Fishing lights is probably the most confusing aspect when shopping for gear for this sport. So, as an innovator, boat captain, educator, and researcher, I have consolidated this argument into toy lights versus tool lights. What's a toy light? A toy light is a light that brags about the amount of lumens. And over the decades, people are conditioned to believe the higher the lumens, the better you'll fish. There is nothing to support that. I can tell you that trying to introduce light into a dark marine environment takes finesse, and you cannot recklessly light up the water and expect the marine life to be okay with that. So a toy light is just a light that was sold to you that supposedly is waterproof, most likely will have a short warranty, and that's it. Chances are high they don't even know how their light affects marine life, because they're just looking for something to make and sell. A toy light usually has short cord, no accessories, meaning you can't anchor it, you can't change its orientation in the water column. They don't do well at all in tidal water, and this doesn't have any power to speak of, and it just doesn't work out in our environment. Plus, you're getting consistent results. The tool light is not lumen driven, because a tool light is backlighting the marine life. So it creates an underwater halo so that you can see them as they're backlit. So therefore, the whole powerful lumen thing is not the issue. With these, you will always have that vertical orientation, and you also can add an anchor. So now you can actually anchor the light in the location that really, really matters to you. And a toy light doesn't have any anchoring ability. And you want it to be vertical. And all of my research that's been out there for a decade or so has proven that concept. It needs to be upright. And when you do that, you have the ability to manipulate the targets, which we'll get into later in the seminar. So you have a toy light, you have a tool light, which is an expanded purpose light, meaning it does more than just illuminate. And then you have a toolbox light, which is, in our case, the Mac Daddy Smart Light that does 8 things. So that's a multi-mode type of light. And again, it's not driven by high lumens because it's about creating a halo ring that backlights the shrimp. So you don't need these powerful lumens that the other manufacturers market, which goes against the issue of battery conservation. So a toolbox light and a tool light are one and the same. One is a multi-mode, one is a single mode. But both of them will give you consistent results. A toy light is a light that's randomly tossed, and whatever the conditions are and however it settles has the influence on your outcome. which is usually negative. So when you shop for lights, you want an expanded purpose light that you can anchor, that you can control the depth, that you can control the orientation of how the light sits in the water column, and you need the ability to manipulate. Oh, have I piqued your interest? Here shortly, we're going to get real involved into exactly what manipulation strategies do. When I got into shrimping in the early 2000 era, it was a very localized sport where you couldn't go into any retail store and buy anything. So we had to innovate it ourselves. And then there was a club, and there were light building parties. And this is how we got along. There was an ocean between what we needed and what retail sold. And because it was such a small world, there was no way anybody was going to bring any sophistication to this sport. This is a sample of the LED generation, the first one from 2009. And I was given a prototype from which I conducted a lot of my research. And you can see where I'm playing with pool noodles when I was playing with the vertical orientation and adding an anchor and all these various things that were very important to my research. Unfortunately, my friend and I did not evolve it any further. We both had different interests and ideas. I partnered with a gentleman in 2012 that listened to what I had to offer, and he brought a lot of technical whereabouts with him. So we entered the era of adding a white strip of LEDs with the green strip with 3 battery clips so that you could have both fire at the same time, make it all white or just green. It was a manual-driven 3-mode light. But as you can see, these tube lights aren't meant to last. They're not meant to have a lot of hours on them. And when you put the end caps on, you trap air, and over time, they'll corrode. So this is all we had, which was so much better than what retail had, that we put up with the shortcomings. And it was that way until 2015. You can see that even back then, when these original Mac Daddies were built, that expanded purpose was the thing that I was trying to lead the industry with. And I did meet with resistance, but over time, it won out. You could set the depth, you can add an anchor, but there was no flotation device to ensure the vertical orientation. But this was far better than what we had. And fishing lights hadn't really evolved. They're pretty much the same. They were in tubes when they were long fluorescents. They were in tubes when they were halogen bulbs. And they were in tubes when you wrapped a string of LEDs in it. But I changed all that and patented my idea for the next generation light in 2015. I'm not going to get into the differences between the smart light and the single mode light. The point is I wanted to sustain this sport, and I knew to do that I would have to innovate a light that can withstand the test of time and be pleasing to consumers. And I wanted to pair it with an educational program so that in the event of my death, my legacy of instructing, innovating, and researching can pass the torch on to the next generation of shrimpers. For that reason, it's probably one of the best things I set out to do. But had it not been for a particular person investing, my idea would have just been that, an idea. As a 100% disabled veteran, I could hardly afford this venture myself. In summary, the takeaway point is this. It's not about lumens. It's about strategies. Light deployment strategies, enabling you to manipulate the biologicals using light frequency. That's it. That's all. In all fairness, I need to give credit where credit is due. Fishing light manufacturers make it very clear that their products attract bait. That is honestly the truth. The problem is when a light attracts bait, it can fail the light. The bait pods are hundreds and thousands big, and the light just gets swallowed in the pod. It just stops illuminating. You see nothing. You swear your battery failed or your light broke. Once these bait pods surround your light, you're done. Yes, it's time to pull up your anchor and go home. Or you can join the choir of people making music by the sounds of their lights kerplunking, thinking if they just rethrow, the bait fish will be gone. They haven't won that argument yet. When I had the opportunity to innovate the next generation light, I took this into account. And I'm just going to say, on the Mac Daddy Smart Light, we have a catfish bomb strobe mode that blasts these guys off the light. Does it recover all your light field? No, but it recovers enough to keep you in the hunt. I have been talking about anchoring hardware. Well, let's look at the anchor I'm talking about. I designed this 7-pound pyramid anchor in 2005. It met with great resistance. People said, well, who would pay you for that? Who knew that this is now the industry standard? Why did I choose this? Well, if you could throw a 6-ounce pyramid sinker off the beach out into the ocean and it will stick, well, what happens if I just add a few pounds to it? Then it should hold my shrimp light. Well, darn if it didn't. And this is the industry standard. Now, if you don't have it and you can't find it, because these are custom made by people locally, you can get hand weights at a big box store. Come up with something that's not going to be round because it will roll on hardpan. And, and if it gets stuck in coquina rock, that's an issue. But I have an idea from a very, very clever friend of mine. My friend Paul was so clever when he came up with this homemade anchor. He used concrete, a plastic container. I don't know if that's a U-bolt or he bent some kind of metal thing like a hanger or something like that. And he makes multiples, which is wonderful because he fishes really hostile environments in Brevard County. But note the cable tie. He has a breakaway system. One end is attached to the hook, and the other end is attached to his rope. That's perfect. It's not if you lose your anchor, it's when. All of these topics that I've discussed today are all important. When you break it down by category, sometimes we really can't look at it all as a whole. Well, we are now, because it's all about this crustacean, the one thing that America can't live without. But it's this little guy that has the biggest light sensitivity issue ever. It is the most elusive. It is the hardest to catch. If you use this science, you will master the art of catching shrimp. And if you can do that, you can catch any species at night. There's either light tolerant or light intolerant. Well, we know where this guy falls. Look at the size of his eyes. We covered a lot of ground, getting through the gear, giving a little background, but now we're at the point now where we're starting to get into the science and the techniques and all of that. So here is a fully rigged light, and it has a 17-foot rope. It has a 7-pound anchor, and it's got the long line clip, which is a depth setting accessory. And when you set the depth, you just need to know or have some idea what your depth is. Once you have your depth, you subtract it by 8. So if we're in, for example, 12 foot of water. 12 minus 8 is 4. So I touch my weight and I guesstimate 4 foot up the rope and I clip it. So when I deploy the light, it'll be in the perfect part of the water column. And we'll get into how critical that is. Yes, it's that easy. One formula, depth minus 8. And you can take that to the bank. So what I want to do here is I want to train your eye. Look at that image. The lights, there's 2 of them, are not too bright, and the light field is not too dim. Look at the uniformity, and depending on the clarity of the water, will determine how large that circle of light is. The best way to know if your lights are set well is to take your phone out and take a picture. If you see any bright spots, and clearly you can tell that's your light, it's overly bright compared to the overall circle of light, it's too high in the water column. In that case, you redeploy. So, in this case, with that sidewalk of darkness, as we call that, it reduces your visibility by a high percentage. So you won't see them because that open area, that roadway that looks like it's traveling right through your light field, is not backlit. And if it's not backlit, it complicates your visuals. So what is the fix? It's real simple. You can redeploy both lights, but the ideal situation, going back to the first slide, which I said was perfection, is make sure when you deploy your second light, it overlaps the circle of light given off by your first deployment. Let's say this again. To make sure you don't create that dark sidewalk, after you deploy the first light, your second light, its circle must overlap the circle of light from the first deployment so that it looks like one uniform green circle of light. So how do we prevent this scenario? If you're going to deploy 2 lights, after your first light, you will have a distinct circle of light. When you deploy your second light, you have to make sure it's a little closer to the first one so that its circle of light will overlap the circle of light from the first one. So with practice, quickly, you will know and get a feel for how far to actually deploy the light with an anchor to achieve 2 overlapping circles of light. This is exactly what you absolutely do not want to see. And when I travel the river and I see it, I have to go over to the boater and talk to them. You can clearly see in this image 3 hot spots. Those lights are so close to the surface that they burn hotter when you look at them. This is exactly 100% what you do not want. Because remember, if this is what it looks like as your photography of your light field at the start of your night, imagine after 3 hours how much water levels have dropped. And your lights will be bobbling on the top of the water. And all you're doing is redirecting the shrimp to go deeper in the water column and under your boat. This is death. This light set is fatal. I can't say it enough. After you feel you have set your lights a few times at the start of your night, and you got them as deep as possible without compromising your visuals. If your photograph looks like this, you got some more work to do. This is not a perfect image. This is an image that will fail your night if you don't correct it at the start of your hunt. Here comes your first aha moment. This is a diagram of the science that I've been alluding to. The light below is projecting the light like a pancake. It's about 5 foot thick. And when you use the formula, depth minus 8, what that does ensures that above the light, when it's anchored, is unlit. Yes, it's totally black. The green orb that you see is what the shrimp will react in the middle of the water column, and they will rise above it because the water gets darker. And because above the light is not lit, they will safely and calmly swim right over your light field. And when that happens, they're backlit. You see them, but they don't see you. So the most important takeaway is that when you deploy your light at the start of your night, as deep as possible, you have created as much unlit water as possible above your light, knowing the outgoing tide is going to rob you a little and drop it a couple feet. So what we're doing is we're doing the science of backlighting. And this is how you introduce light into a nighttime marine environment in a stealth mode that they do not suspect or detect. Therefore, they're not alarmed and they're not spooking. This is such a vital concept that we're going to magnify this. There's your circle of light under the water. As those shrimp approach your light, it's offensive to them. So they immediately, instinctively rise to the point where it's getting a little less bright to total darkness. There is no light above the light that's sitting vertical in that water column. It is black as the ace of spades. And this is like a snapshot of showing you that when the shrimp are horizontal to your orb of light under the water and they detect it, they climb until they hit black, unlit water where they feel the safest, which is great because I would say roughly with a perfect light set, you have at least 4 foot of unlit water above it. And depending on the clarity, you'll probably see at least that. That's a perfect light set. That's a productive light set. You've kept the balance in the marine environment, yet you're extrapolating your targets. That was a lot. So let's pull the lens back. Sometimes less is more. This is a productive light field as a result of utilizing the formula depth minus 8. Doing that, what you're doing is manipulating biological targets using light frequency. That sounds pretty gnarly, doesn't it? I kind of like the depth minus 8 myself. It's so simple to remember, and you don't have to get all caught up in all of the academia of science. Blah, that's brain clutter. Let's keep it simple, but productive. Once again, set your lights as deep as possible at the start of the night using depth -8, and this is what's happening under the water. It's all success. It's just that simple. This is what happens when you randomly deploy a light. This is how night fishing and shrimping was for 50 years. I changed that by proving that science has a role that leads to consistent results. Luck is random and is inconsistent. Depth -8 ensures you have the right amount of black water. Without it, you're not going to do well. Skunking is not okay. Want more for yourself. Science doesn't have to be scary. It just needs to be productive. I want to show you more theory. An expanded tool light that has vertical flotation, anchoring system, will never have this outcome. The rest of the fishing light market most likely will, because of the strong pull of tidal currents. But let's go into theory so we clearly understand the whole picture and not just how to do something. This is a light that's producing a diagonal light field. And when the shrimp run into it, you can see the motion. They go upwards, but there's no black water. So what they're doing is they're going around it. It's really hard to show you dimension in a photograph. But what they're doing is they're heading towards the ocean to go around that orb about 18 foot. They're going to hang a right, and then they're going to go all the way around it and continue going the way they want to go. So you'll never see anything in your light field. This is the problem with light manufacturers. This is actually what their lights do. But you, the consumer, get the short end of the stick. So always buy an expanded tool light. And if they can't talk about this like I am, well, there you go. And if they are talking about it, it's because they learned it from me. Some people like to make their lights. 20 years ago, when we were making them with PVC tubes, some of them with the long fluorescent bulb were over 2 foot long. Some of them were 48 inches. Some were 36 inches. They were extremely heavy, and they laid across the bottom. Why am I sharing this? I was that shrimper that didn't do well. It was so sporadic, and I was so inconsistent that I now know why. And you can see with this diagram, I was blowing a whole wall of light to the top of the water column. There was no way the shrimp was going to go through that wall of light. They went around it. That's why I never saw anything. So if your light is laying on the bottom, horizontal, shooting a beam of light towards the top, then you worked really hard to deter them from your visuals. I'm going to leave you with some advice. Whatever light you choose, that's your choice. But make sure you make an informed decision for whatever you decide you want to buy. Ask the light builder the tough questions. Don't blindly trust that they built it out of some kind of evidentiary research. Ask the hard questions. And if all they want to talk about is lumens, there's your answer. That's the one thing I don't talk about, because my light theory is all about the halo, to backlight them. I don't need to light up New York. I don't need to light up the world. I just need to be able to see them. Therefore, using depth -8 in science, we've created a halo so that we can see. And that's worth repeating. so we can see. That ensures we keep the balance of the marine life intact. We're operating in stealth mode where we can see them and they cannot see us. Isn't that the point? We talked about the moon cycle. Go when the tide is strong. Success in night fishing is when you've applied multiple advantages. Going on a stronger current is an advantage. Second, use science. In this case, depth -8. That ensures you have plenty of black water to manipulate them to the upper water column so that you see them and they don't see you. I've gone over a lot, but now we're going to get into manipulation strategies. You know what? I want to go over this just one more time. The back end of this seminar is getting into the weeds of showing you exactly how we manipulate the marine life using multiple lights. It's all premised on this concept. It's just that important. Here's a diagram of the halo ring, which is that circle of light that backlights the targets. And it's calculated by depth -8. So as you can see in the diagram, in the first box, it's black and it says unlit water. That is the area that will be affected by the depth -8 formula. You will always have more unlit water at the top of the light than you will at the bottom. Following the unlit portion, you actually see a slice of the halo ring that will always be 5 foot thick under the water. And below that is unlit water. So the targets, you can either go above your light or under your light. Because there's not going to be a whole lot of space under the light, they will choose to go above your light. So I just wanted to illustrate this theory because it's hard to talk about theory and expect people to fully grasp that. A halo ring, or the light that's illuminated by the lamp, I'm calling the halo ring. It backlights the targets, and this is what allows us to capture our targets in stealth mode. Young in my career, I was influenced by whatever people told me, because oftentimes there was a lack of resource to check on their facts. Science reduces the need for excessive lumens. For some reason, the fishing market has taught us the more lumens, the better you'll fish. That is all marketing propaganda, and there's no evidence to prove that. As you can see, lumens do not catch fish. Science-driven technique does. And we have spent the first 40 minutes or so going over all of that. You'll also notice to the right in the diagram, that is the science that we're delivering. Doesn't that make sense? Isn't that something that you feel that you can have confidence in? You should, because it works. This is not about lumens. Actually, you want to use the least amount of lumens. Because remember, those lumens are only creating the backlight for you to see. And after 18 foot of that circle, those lumens don't go anywhere. So let's get our priorities straight. The importance of a fishing light is to backlight your target. I tell you what, I'm going to say something to you, and this is going to stick with you for the rest of your life. For those that are wondering, oh my goodness, how am I going to remember all this? I'm about to fix that. Go to that right side of that diagram. Pretend that that is a well-known store brand cookie that has a chocolate top wafer, vanilla icing, and a bottom chocolate wafer. If you think about your light set as a cookie, remember that famous store brand cookie that goes really great with milk, and it's been around for decades. So just do the cookie thing. It's the cookie theory. Unlit water, lamp illumination, unlit water. There's your cookie. Now go set your lights like a cookie. You know, every time you see one of these cookies, you're going to think about setting lights when you go shrimping. You will never forget this. But having said that, now that we understand the mechanics of the science, now when you stand on your boat and you're looking into the water, that circle took a lot of science now, didn't it? But what you see is green water. The visual light field targets are just under that top water. And the depth of that light field has to do with your cookie set. Okay then, let's go have a snack. Are you ready? Let's do this. When you have 2 lights or more, you can go next level manipulating targets using light frequencies. In this case, in this illustration, this is a 2 light set. Now, for educational purposes, there is white space between the 2 green circles of light. That was drawn to drive the point home that the targets coming towards you, shrimp or whatever you're fishing for, is following the outgoing and they're traveling north. So this is what that slide depicts. Now, when you set 2 lights, you want both circles, 1 circle per light, to overlap. And you want that circle to just touch the fiberglass of your boat. And the reason for this is we don't want to give them any dark area where they could escape. If you have a flaw in your light set that has a dimmer consistency, they will find it and they'll mass exit it through it. So don't give it to them and then they can't do this exodus. So bring your 2 circles of light overlapping and make sure the bottom of that circle touches your boat. And that way you have ensured you haven't left any kind of a back door open. I'm going to teach you a trick here. If you have somebody on your boat that's learning and may not have the skills that you do, you might get a little upset when you see them missing a lot of shrimp, for example. And we don't want to hurt feelings and we don't want to act like we're all business and not fun. But some of us are that way, that you can actually manipulate the shrimp by using your lights. Now look at this diagram. The one by the bow is out further than the one by the stern. That light pattern causes the shrimp to follow that diagonal trajectory, and they, or the bulk of them, will appear to the dipper at the bow. Sometimes you didn't choose this for yourself, but you did. I've heard it hundreds of times. Captain Lee, there's my neighbor. Every time I bring my neighbor, he's like the shrimp whisperer. They all go to him. This is why. It's not because he's the shrimp whisperer, and it's not because the neighbor's great. What has happened is the stern light is not out as far as the bow light. So therefore, through the manipulation of shrimp using light frequencies, you are sending the bulk of them to the bow. And that's why that person does so well. So if you have a weak person, if you're a charter captain and you want to make sure your charter gets a full pull, well, then what you want to do is pull a little bit and force them to come to you. So it's a nice way to save the night and make sure the customer enjoys themselves. Or if inadvertently you're noticing that all the shrimp are going to the other person on your boat, then you need to take corrective action now. To get a full pull, both people have to be productive. You should be emptying your socks about the same time because you have about the same amount. So to be an effective captain on your boat, you want to make sure that your team is dipping in a balance type situation. And one way to know is if one person seems to be getting more than the other. That's because the lights aren't even, and it takes a real quick correction by going to the light that's out further, pick up the cord, give it a little jerk, move it in, and bingo. Everybody's dipping the same. It also is that advantage I talk about. You have complete control over your outcome if the shrimp are running. So if everybody's not dipping as well as you are, chances are you have one light that's out further. This is huge. It can help you, it can hurt you. This is the same kind of situation, but the opposite. In this case, the stern light is out further than the bow light, and the majority of the shrimp are coming into the stern dipper, whether intentional or not, whether it's purposeful or by accident. You should always understand that both people have to be equally productive. So again, before my research was published, people accepted how everything went was how it went. But now, if you see a pattern, then you know immediately it was caused by the response to the light under the water. And if it's not in your favor, then you have time to correct so that you don't waste the rest of the night compromised. And that's the beautiful thing. You'll recognize it. Because when the wind's blowing strong from the north and there's froth and chop and it's nasty and gnarly, how do you really know when you have both lights pretty even? Well, the great thing about science is look for patterns. Wait till the shrimp start coming through and they'll tell you. If both dippers are doing great, they're perfect. If one person is doing most of the work, you got a problem. So the shrimp will tell you this by their behavior. So don't get caught in, are my lights even? Should I do it now? The answer is no. You only take corrective action if you see a problem. Remember, as that tide's going out, that tide is getting stronger. You never want to reset your lights unless your situation is absolutely fatal. In the case of the balance being off in your boat between two dippers, that's corrected by pulling in the light that has walked out further. That's it. Real simple. But do it in small increments. Because if you pull it in too much, you created the opposite diagonal in the other direction. It sounds like it's moody. Not really. As long as the shrimp are coming evenly to your side of your boat, it's perfect. And if they're not, all I'm saying is you can change that. That's the difference between science and luck. There's no question that stern hurting or bow hurting is cool. It is very cool because you can literally manipulate hundreds and hundreds of shrimp and change their navigation path to your boat and nets. That's powerful. But this is my favorite one. This is probably the most common light set, and it takes 3 lights. You have your standard goalposts because we don't want to throw the balance of the boat off. But we have a third light, which is at, if you're looking at a clock, 12 o'clock. Now what I do is I take this third light and I sink it as far as I can to the bottom, way out there. So I would say it's probably 2, maybe 3 feet off the bottom. It's a dangerous deployment in that if your lead strikes that light, you just broke your light. So be careful about that. So what that does is, well, let's just give it a name. That 12 o'clock lamp I call the sacrificial lamp because it's not going to show me any kind of light on the top surface. I'm not going to see it. So to me, the only things that are lit are my goalposts. So it is that deep that there is no light coming off of it. So you kind of have to wonder, is it working or not? But it is. And what I'm doing is, because it's way out there, I threw it as far as I could and not pop my electrical cord off the battery. That drives the bottom walkers, the ones so close to the bottom, it brings them into the middle of the water column. And when that happens, the 2 goalpost lights deter them to go into your black water. Remember, depth -8? So what we created was a stair step. So we have one light at 12 o'clock, about 2 foot off the bottom. And then we have our other ones 4 to 6 foot off the bottom. So it creates that stair step. So we're clearly manipulating the shrimp using light frequency because what we're expecting is a behavioral change where they're going to source dark water. But when they do that, they hit your goalpost lights and then they continue upwards further to the dark water, which again, they become backlit. You see them, you dip them, game over. Let's go over this concept one more time and put a different lens on it. So if I could just slice the scene, this is what it would look like. There's your 12 o'clock lamp to the right, sunk as low as possible without striking it with your lead weight. And then you have your goalposts closest to the boat. So what this does is gives you the advantage to start manipulating the shrimp 25 to 40 some out from your boat. I mean, ahead of you, way out there. You have the opportunity to grab them and change their trajectory that far away. And that's what that sacrificial 12 o'clock lamp lets you do. It puts them on notice so that when they do rise and you eventually see them, you have probably controlled that trajectory for about That's impressive. So do you have to have 3 lights? No. But if you're into manipulating the shrimp using light frequencies, then yes, 3 lights are absolutely necessary. We've talked about manipulating the shrimp by forcing them into black water if you have 1 light. We've talked about if you have multiple lights, you can herd them to your stern, to your bow. And if you have 3 lights, you can actually stair step them and actually start your manipulation twice as far away from your boat. These are all the things that science allows us to do. With all the different lights on the market, we all can agree that the marketing points have been that a fishing light attracts bait. I think that's the main reason why people buy it. But what the other manufacturers don't tell you is you can attract so much bait that it actually blacks out your light. There's no way any light can escape out into the water because you've got thousands of bait fish circling your light in a big beach ball manner. And that's a problem. So let me go ahead and take that bait fish pod off the diagram. So this can cost you your night. If you're doing great, and we see this more around springtime when the bait is in versus really cold water, that when this bait fish problem happens, it can make you go home before you're ready to go home. If you can't see and you don't have light, what are you staying there for? So what happens about mid-tide is we hear a lot of kerplunking and people resetting their lights, and then 15, 20, 30 minutes later, they're doing it again, and then they keep doing it again. And what they're battling is bait fish blackout. So if you have the Mac Daddy Smart Light, there is a catfish strobe mode. It's high intensity, and I did a lot of work on this, and it was really hard to find anything that can offend a catfish. And I found a frequency that it hates. Now, let's align our expectations. Will it totally blow them all off your light so that you recover 100% of your light field? The answer is no. But if you recover 25%, that's more light than anybody else has. And you can continue fishing or dipping shrimp with a 25% light field. It keeps you dipping, you're still fighting. In other words, it gives you enough of a light field that you don't have to go home. Now, as soon as you turn the strobe off, they'll come back. That's true. So it's nice when you have somebody that can kind of work that strobe button and give you a break, because a rapid strobing light, if you have light sensitivity, could bring on a seizure. It can bring on headaches. It's really intense. So you really want to kind of look away, and the dipping person needs to look straight down. So you're only going to be strobing for about a minute and a half, and that will bust them off, and you just kind of rotate it and you'll find your way and salvage. People love it. So it's real simple. You take 3 lights and you build a bouquet, like a flower bouquet, and they're real close together. They're probably 3 feet apart, 3 or 4 foot, and it's a delicate deployment. If you strike your weight on any of these lights, you lost your lights. Not everybody has access to a boat, but you most likely have access to a pier where you know shrimp are being caught. Remember earlier when we talked about herding, how you can shift the stream towards the bow or the stern by having one light out further than the other? When you go to the pier, pick a neighbor and treat that person as your second light, and then throw your light accordingly. If your neighbor's light is up close, then you deploy your light further out, and you will divert the stream to you. And you know what? They won't even know it. All is fair in love and war, right? I don't know about all that. But what I do know is I made my case about science, I hope. Remember, the more advantages you have, the better your outcome. Strategy is repeatable. Use science to take full control over your hunt. Never leave anything to luck. Give yourself every advantage. I firmly believe hunt smarter, not harder.